Beyond Reason Radio.
The New York Times has abandoned traditional journalism ethics in order to pursue a woke agenda. That's not me saying that, believe it or not. That is a former New York Times editor who spent 28 years working for the paper. For me, quote here, for me, the issue is journalistic integrity. Ideology and journalism do not mix because ideology wants an outcome and good journalism does not. That's what ex-Times editor Tom Kuntz wrote in, he now works for Real Clear Investigations. He wrote that in a column yesterday. It says ideology dictates a blatant double standard for coverage of sexual misconduct charges. Think of what Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh endured in his confirmation hearings and the Times' deferential treatment of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. He also said the paper's 1619 Project, which sought to trace the history of American slavery to 1619, had gravely distorted the history and legacy of slavery in America, and that the paper had failed to answer questions about significant shortcomings in its impeachment coverage. It said, having worked as an editor at the Times for 28 years before leaving on good terms in early 2016, I know that the flaws in that reporting are not an outlier. They flow instead from an evolving culture that abandoned the let the chips fall where they may ethic of traditional journalism to one that embraces partisan and results-oriented agendas. He notes that Times reporters Maggie Haberman and Kenneth Vogel disclosed on Twitter some of the flaws in their coverage of research firms Fusion GPS and its infamous Steele dossier, but said the paper has not been as forthcoming about those shortcomings in formal reporting. This is just proof that the whole Kavanaugh thing, forget about the Biden thing for a second, whether he's guilty or not guilty. It's just proof that the whole Kavanaugh thing was really about politics. Mm-hmm. It was not about the Me Too movement. It was not about believing women. It was not about real sympathy for Christine Blasey Ford.
That was just a way to gin up support.
It was about politics and, of course, the abortion issue. Really, that's what it was about. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on until 8 p.m. tonight here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. Lots to get to. We're on Facebook Live as well. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page or send me a friend request. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is in the control room as well today. Tom, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm really excited about our special guest at the end of the show and the Laffee Yaffee Spotlight.
Yes, you found something that's very interesting. And we will. I haven't done that, I don't think, the past couple of shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to force it. If there's not something out there that made me laugh, I'm not going to force something on the air. So if we find something that makes me laugh, then we'll have things that made Yaffee Laffee, and we will end the show with that once again.
A very popular lady. A lady who is in just about every other house in the world is going to be stopping by.
Don't give it all away, Tom. By the way, there was some breaking news today I want to get to really quickly. Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings apparently is going to allow some opening of retail stores and restaurants on Monday. Partial openings. And why can't we open the hair salons? Is there an effort out there? Is there a conspiracy out there to bring back mullets? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Is there an underlying conspiracy in Florida to bring back the mullet? Because I don't understand. People say you can't open the hair salons because you can't social distance in a hair salon. Mm-hmm. But there are ways you can take steps to protect people in a hair salon. You can have people wait in their car until they're ready to come out so it's not overcrowded. You can have the hairstylists wear masks. You can have them wear gloves. You can have them clean their stations. I don't understand what is the big deal here. You can have the customers wear masks. I'm going to say this over and over again. What really spreads this virus is crowds in indoor spaces. People really close together, lots of people really close together in indoor places. That is what we know for sure. More than anything spreads this virus. And it's all about viral load. People are more affected by the virus based on the dose of the virus they get, the viral load they get of the virus. That only happens when they're inundated with a lot of the virus, which only happens in indoor crowded spaces. So one thing I want to address here, and we're going to talk more about Biden later. We also have to talk about the Michael Flynn controversy, what the FBI did.
Man, oh man, is that getting to be a hot topic?
Yeah, I mean, because you can't ignore it anymore. There's just such a trend here, and lots of people on the left and the media wanted to over-defend the FBI, and then when you look into it, it's just not look good for the FBI. But it goes back to, it's kind of similar, actually, to the New York Times thing I just talked about. It's all about bias and trying to create an outcome that fits your preconceived notion. That's really what was going on in the FBI. I'll play a voice of reason on that later on in the show. But there was an article that I wanted to get to here that causes me some concern. I posted this on Facebook and commented on it as well earlier. This is from the U.S. Sun.com, thesun.com. Wave of fear, is the headline. Germany faces having to bring back strict coronavirus lockdowns as cases surge just days after easing them. The country has slowly been easing its lockdown after faring much better than its European neighbors as a result of an aggressive policy of mass testing. But the country's virus reproduction rate, known as R, which measures how many people the average person with COVID-19 affects, has bounced back to just below 1. That means one person with the virus infects one other person on average. Earlier this month, it was lower. This is bringing fear that if it goes back to 1, they will have to go back to the lockdowns. And this has been my fear basically since the beginning of all this. That people still think the purpose of the lockdowns was to stop the spread. That was never going to stop the spread. Ever. It was never the original intention was to stop the spread. It was to slow the spread. It was meant to give us time to prepare. Our leaders need to be more clear on this, in my opinion. When we open up and test more, there will be a rise in cases. That is inevitable. There's going to be a rise in cases once we start to open up a little bit until there is a vaccine. But I'm still seeing this debate out there that we can't open up until it's safe, until it's completely safe. But I'm not hearing when that is. What is the parameters when we decide it's safe to open up again? When? I hear a lot of Democrats out there just saying it's not safe now, but when then will it be safe? We need answers. And no, Tom Benson, I don't want to hear after November 4th, after the next election.
November 4th, that's when it becomes, never mind.
But there's another thing that's bothered me. Mm-hmm. I am not one who thinks we should have done nothing. Obviously, there were certain steps we had to take, especially when you're talking about what happened in New York City, or some of the big cities, and nursing homes. Nursing homes are really what's been hit. So obviously we had to do something to protect the nursing homes or to react to that. But I think we went too far, and I've been pretty clear on that for weeks now. We've gone too far with these lockdowns. It's gone way too draconian and unnecessary, and the cure is becoming worse than the disease. But people respond to me on social media when I say that, and they say this. Well, I would rather go too far than not far enough. One person said, I will never understand people thinking we went too far in an unknown virus. Now, here's the thing. I don't believe someone when they tell me that they think there is no such thing as going too far. They might think we haven't gone too far this time. That would be a more honest response. But to say, you can't go too far, we have to be better safe than sorry, right? So what if the government, theoretically then, the government can't go too far. So what if the government decided then to shut everything down, including the grocery stores and everything, lock you in your homes by force, and the only sustenance you get is bread and water once a day, and they just deliver it to your house? Would then you think they gone too far?
You'll see pitchforks and burning torches.
Exactly. Even by the people who are telling me you can't go too far, better safe than sorry. That's not an intelligent argument you're making. That's just an emotional appeal that you're making to me. Leaders always have to weigh the pros and cons. Leaders and mature adults always have to look at things. Is this going too far? Is this not going far enough? Will this affect the economy more than it will help stop the spread? These are things that leaders have to weigh. And then I had someone on Twitter respond to me as well. The other one was on Facebook. Someone on Twitter responded to me and said, the response was necessary due to the delayed response to the initial outbreak by our federal government. Rather than blame a foreign government for not letting us in, we should have acted upon a worst-case premise. The idea that the government should always act upon a worst-case scenario is completely absurd. Could you imagine if every potential crisis out there, the government acted on, well, we have to assume worst case scenario? You would lose your freedom. They would use that as an excuse to everything, and you would lose your freedom. So many people are telling me they do not want to have the debate on whether we went too far or not. The debate on whether we went too far or not is vital in a free society. In order to have a free society, we have to be talking about that. And I don't want to hear these stupid excuses, we should have been prepared for worst case scenario. It's absurd. A free society cannot always base everything on worst case scenarios. Could you imagine if we did that, maybe nuclear war, that we just constantly prepared for worst case scenarios as a country? You can't always prepare for, you know what one of the worst case scenarios is in this country? That Yellowstone Park erupts because it's actually a super volcano.
Uh-huh.
So what should we do? The government should have prepared for a worst case scenario. It's impossible. These are not intelligent arguments people are having with me. They're not actually looking at the realistic solutions and actually looking at the pros and cons and actually showing true leadership and being mature adults. This is just emotional appeals. I don't want to die. Do what you can. I don't want to die. You know, I'm someone who can be kind of anxious sometimes about these things, but just mere anxiety and panic doesn't solve the problem. And sometimes the anxiety and panic can cause more problems than the problem you're trying to solve. We can't just be sheep and follow the crowd. An example of this is a piece by the mayor of Atlanta, not happy with what the governor of Georgia is doing. We're going to get into that. And Governor DeSantis, I played this cut yesterday. I'm going to play it again because I think he's exactly right. We have much more to get to on this edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So I got the typical responses by people already. One person said it's all about testing. It's BS. There was somebody out there, a Nobel laureate apparently out there, said we'd have to do 20 to 30 million tests a day to be able to test enough to be able to trace people and know what's going on, and we have to stay closed until there's enough testing. It's completely unrealistic. This whole number of testing, it's a talking point. I mean, come on. I know they're going to disagree with me, but that's just an excuse to delay this. Trust me, they'll move the goalposts on testing as well. And then I have the other usual responses that if you're concerned about the country as a whole and you're concerned more about, if you're concerned not just about the deaths, of course I'm concerned about people dying. I don't want people to die. But there are bigger factors here as well, and people that can die of other things other than the virus. Oh, you're just not concerned about the death. You're cold-hearted. All you care about is money. So it's the typical arguments that I get against what I'm saying. So, I guess it's expected. But there's an article in the Atlantic today from the mayor of Atlanta. Says here, Atlanta isn't ready to reopen, and neither is Georgia. Says Atlanta faces unusual challenges as we cope with the ongoing pandemic. The political reality is that we are a blue city in a red state trying to balance public health concerns in a diverse environment while getting our economy back on track as soon as possible. Says, as the mayor of Georgia's largest city, I express opposition to Governor Brian Kemp's recent order allowing certain businesses, dine-in restaurants, gyms, hair and nail salons, barbershops, tattoo parlors, and bowling alleys to reopen before health experts say doing so is safe. I hope the day for Atlanta to endorse such a move will come soon, but it is not here yet. When will it be there then? This is not the answer. I'm not hearing the answers. There's no answer in this.
So, in other words, he didn't provide any alternative date or situation that would allow opening to happen.
Well, it's actually a she, but no.
Excuse me.
No, I mean, they talk about a council. That it's reset. That we'll come up with a council and it's going to be reset. Eventually, we're going to have to reopen. And eventually, when we reopen, there's going to be a rise in cases. I'm not saying we can't take steps, but people can be responsible. They can wear masks. They can social distance. They can avoid large crowds.
They could decide not to participate.
And so on and so forth. But eventually we're going to have to reopen. And eventually we're going to have to live with the virus. And I don't want to hear the point, testing. That's not going to solve this problem. I'm not against testing. But when you have a country of 330 million people, you're not going to be able to contact trace and test in a big enough capacity to be able to contain this virus to the point where everyone just feels safe now and we'll all be able to go back out and don't have to worry about the virus. It's not going to happen. It's completely unrealistic. So what my biggest problem with all of this is we have created unrealistic expectations. We've created unrealistic expectations in responding to this virus. When I hear the Atlanta mayor say it's not safe now, then when? When will it be safe? And what does safe look like? What is your plan? Oh, we have a council that's working on it. What have they been doing for the last month? Then you should have already been working on it. The fact is, cases are going to go up, unfortunately, and that's just the fact. Now, another issue that has come up here, and you hear the typical talking points on both sides, is when we do start to open things back up, there is going to be a chance that some people catch it. As I mentioned, there will probably be a rise in cases. That's why what the really smart thing to do is to protect the vulnerable and the elderly and keep them safe and quarantined and able to stay at home the best we can. That is the best way to minimize the deaths and minimize hospitalization while allowing most everyone else to be able to go back to work in a responsible fashion with social distancing. But the fact is, a lot of businesses are afraid that if we let people go back to work, that the workers are going to start suing the businesses. The workers and the customers are going to start suing the businesses if they happen to catch COVID-19. So there has to be a way to prevent that from happening, to prevent just a barrage of lawsuits that basically keeps the economy stalled for a long period of time. That's no longer about the virus, but just about trying to prevent even more lawsuits. So I'm going to talk more about that in a sec, but I do want to play this cut here from Governor Ron DeSantis. He was exactly right yesterday when he said this.
We will get Florida back on its feet by using an approach that is safe, smart, and step by step. What is our biggest obstacle? Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear sparked by constant doom and gloom and hysteria that has permeated our culture for the last 6 weeks.
All right. So there we go. He's exactly right. Right now, there's been so much doom and gloom in our culture and in our media and on the left about this over and over again that a lot of what's stopping us is fear. And DeSantis is moving slower than I would like him. But the fact that he's moving at all is getting a lot of criticism, which is all based on fear. And no, just because I'm someone who says we shouldn't be afraid all the time doesn't mean I don't care about, you don't care about people who are dying. It's just absurd. That is an emotional response, not based in logic, reason, or intelligence, or facts. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page or send me a friend request. Follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. Sorry if I'm getting a little angry at people, and because it's just frustrating. It's so frustrating because so much of the response that I'm getting from people on this, it's just an emotional appeal without any basis in reality. And I actually see it on both sides. So there is a lot of people on my side just said, open up everything now. This is just the flu. It's not a big deal. Look at New York City. It's not just the flu. It's not. And we're not going to open up everything at once right away. It's just not going to happen. It's just not realistic. But then the other side says, well, we should, there is no going too far. Shutdowns might have gone too far, but better safe than sorry. And that's the last gasp of your freedom if that's constantly going to be our approach in this country. You know, the Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness. Well, I think freedom dies in fear. And that's what's happening. We can't be a free country if we don't ask vital questions on maybe one question if the government went too far. So something else that's become a concern here is companies want some protection from liability when it comes to the coronavirus, because they're afraid that what's going to happen is when we start reopening, which has to happen eventually, that workers and patrons are going to start suing the companies. So according to the Wall Street Journal, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told Republican lawmakers on a private call that he wants to shield companies from liability over pandemic-related suits and doesn't support including an infrastructure package and a coronavirus relief bill. Both things I agree with him on, according to people familiar with the call. The Kentucky Republican is responding to a major push by American businesses which are getting hit with lawsuits as workers in meat processing facilities, grocery stores, retailers, and other locations get sick or die from COVID-19. He says, we need to keep the White House in the box, Mr. McConnell said, referring to any infrastructure package. The Democrats in the White House need to get the message. I agree with them on that, but I also agree with them on the liability issue. But, of course, Nancy Pelosi, who is just, Tom Benson's favorite person, he likes to listen to. Nancy Pelosi was asked about this, and her response is, of course, beyond reason. Here it is.
We have every reason to protect our workers and our patients and all of this. So we would not be inclined to be supporting any immunity from liability.
We won't support any immunity from liability because we have to protect the workers. Now, I'm not against having some protection for workers. Obviously, companies who are malice and who are really bad in preparing their companies to protect against the virus, they don't deserve protection. But you can't do everything. You can't protect against all possibilities when it comes to this virus. But what I don't understand, and I don't know why Democrats still can't understand this, and why Nancy Pelosi still can't understand this, is the worker will not have any money if the worker doesn't have a job. A worker is no longer a worker without an employer. They still have to have an employer to pay the employee. But if you don't protect against liabilities and we become a country full of these frivolous lawsuits over the coronavirus, these companies are just going to start shutting down, decreasing production, and laying off workers. Then that worker will no longer have a job. Of course, it seems like the Democrats, all they want to do is just send them checks anyway. So maybe that's the solution. I mean, Ben Sasse, Republican senator, he's a good voice of reason on this. There's no audio here, but I was reading from the Epic Times here on this. Sasse has a liability bill that he's putting forward that protects medical heroes as fight with trial lawyers nears. Says it will be doctors and nurses on the front line versus opportunistic trial lawyers when Congress returns to Washington on May 4th and begins consideration of the fifth major recovery bill. Says, this is what Sasse said. Doctors and nurses around the country have enough to worry about fighting this virus. They shouldn't have to worry about frivolous lawsuits. My bill would give our doctors and nurses some common sense liability protections that they've got our backs. We ought to have theirs. I think he's right. And he was also talking about the fact that companies also need to be protected from this because we can't make this situation with the coronavirus all about some opportunistic I don't know what the word is. I'm looking for an opportunity for trial lawyers just to make a bunch of money off the pandemic.
Sure. And
that's what's going to happen if we don't have some kind of liability protection on this. But there was something else on this. I was reading this in the Huffington Post. That was my first mistake. It says Republicans, they're complaining about Republicans here. It says Republicans are mad because unemployment benefits are actually benefiting the unemployed. Obviously, they don't understand what Republicans are talking about here, but let's get into it. It says here in the Huffington Post, they're blasting Republicans. It says, some Republicans are complaining that the special unemployment insurance Congress created to confront the virus pandemic makes it too easy for workers to do what public health officials say they're supposed to do, stay home. Uh-huh. Republicans, see, this is, every time I read what the left and the Democrats want to do, their solution has everyone to stay home and we just send them checks. It's completely unsustainable for any kind of long-term period of time. But this is the only solution I'm hearing other than the testing. Like that's going to solve everything either.
Russia.
Says Republicans say the new benefit is doing exactly what they warned about last month, making it difficult for some businesses to keep their workers. The senators were attacked in the media, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called them cruel. But they turned out to be right, wrote the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, because they were right. Lindsey Graham wrote in a tweet, I want to make people who lost their job through no fault of their own, but I don't make people whole who lost their job through no fault of their own. But I don't want to pay people more not to work than to actually go to work. Now, the reason why people are complaining about the unemployment benefit system, here's just an example. Usually when you're on unemployment, you get, in some states, you get like $250 a week, $300 a week. They were adding another $600 a week. So these people on unemployment were making more a week than what they were making going to work. Okay. But we also passed the Payroll Protection Program because we wanted to encourage businesses to be able to keep their employees on the payroll. That was the point. But those businesses, some of them essential businesses, by the way, are unable to keep their employees on the payroll because their employees are now making more off of unemployment than they would if they were kept on the payroll. So we created a program because we wanted businesses to keep their employees on the payroll, and then we undermined that very program because we made those employees get more on unemployment benefits.
This is called what the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
It's illogical. Some employers were happy. They finally got the loans. They said, look, I want to continue paying my employees. I want to keep them on the payroll. You think that would be good for the economy, good for the country, good for everyone. And then when they finally get the chance to do this, the employees complain because they were making more off of unemployment. It's completely absurd. That's what Republicans were upset about. Not that unemployed people can get some benefits. But the goal shouldn't be to put more people on unemployment. The goal should be to help the businesses keep them on the payroll. But apparently, according to Nancy Pelosi, that wasn't the goal. The goal is just to keep everyone home all the time. You can't do that until there's a vaccine. It's impossible. Now, one person, you want to talk about the Beyond Reason comment of the day, as it usually it is. AOC was talking about this a little bit, as I like to call her. Here's what she said in a recent interview.
Mass unemployment in the United States was a choice. We had policy options in front of us, and we could have guaranteed payrolls in the United States of America to prevent any person from losing their job due to coronavirus. And what did elected officials do? What did Mitch McConnell do? What did Donald Trump do? They chose not to do that. So these are not things that happen by accident.
And then you undermined it.
Unemployment is not happening by accident. If we face this precipice of mass evictions and foreclosures, that is not an accident. It is a plan. And we have to interrupt that plan. We have to interject in that plan. And that comes with ratcheting up political pressure. It comes with organizing.
So I actually agree with her on one thing. It was not a choice. It was not a choice because the government forced those businesses to shut down. That's why, not because of something Trump did or whatever. The reason why unemployment wasn't a choice for a lot of these people is because the government forced them to shut down. And the only solution to this problem, the real solution to this problem is getting the economy back up and running as much as we can, in a reasonable, responsible way that also protects the vulnerable in this country against the virus. That's the only realistic solution to the problem she's mentioning. But once again, all I hear from Democrats is send them checks, stay home, send them checks. We're going to create a society where people are encouraged to be on unemployment, and then when the virus starts to go away, we're going to wonder why people still don't want to go back to work. Now, AOC also talked about something else here that's kind of beyond reason. Here it is.
And the thing is, when it comes to these rent strikes, to echo what each and every one of you have said, is that people aren't striking because they don't feel like paying rent. People are striking because they can't pay rent. They can't. It doesn't matter how many threatening text messages a landlord or a building sends to their tenants. It doesn't matter how much you threaten legal action. It doesn't matter how much you intimidate anybody. People can't pay. You cannot coerce someone into doing something that they cannot do. There is no money in the bank. People need to feed their kids. We cannot be evicting. We need to be making sure that we are passing policy that allows people to stay in their homes.
See, I agree with her on one thing. She's right. They can't pay their rent because they don't have the money. So she's admitting that we need a functioning economy so people can pay rent, have shelter, have clothing, and eat. She's actually admitting that. But then, of course, what's her solution? send them all checks. Everyone, we need a policy where everyone stays home. We'll just have rent forgiveness, rent strikes, send them all checks. And we think this is a sustainable solution for the long term? How do they not understand basic economics? I guess not. Or they're willfully ignorant on this, because she's right about one thing. Unemployment isn't a choice. It's not their choice that they can't pay rent. But instead of finding a reasonable solution to get people back to work in a safe way, her solution is, no, everyone stay home, and we'll just send them checks. It's just beyond reason. Have my voice of reason of the day next, and something that made Yaffee Laffee. This is Beyond Reason Radio. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Explosive new internal FBI documents unsealed Wednesday show that top FBI officials discussed their motivations for interviewing then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn in the White House in January 2017 and openly questioned if their goal was to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. That's a quote. The handwritten notes written by the FBI's former head of counterintelligence, Bill Priestap. Is it Priestap? I don't know. After a meeting with then FBI Director James Comey and then FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Fox News is told further suggested that agents planned in the alternative to get Flynn to admit to breaking the Logan Act when he spoke to then Russian Ambassador Kislyak during the presidential transition period. Now, most of you probably know this story. I just wanted to recap a little bit of it, but it's obvious that the FBI was kind of out to get Flynn because they were out to get Trump. They just believed Trump was guilty, and they wanted to do anything they could to try to prove Trump's guilt. So, a good voice of reason on this, I think, is actually Judge Andrew Napolitano on Fox News. He was on Fox and Friends this morning, and he said this.
Look, anybody who believes in the rule of law, anybody who believes that the laws should be applied fairly should be utterly scandalized and outraged by this. This is a classic case of the FBI setting out to entrap someone and reducing it to writing. You know, early on in law school, law students are taught, conspirators don't agree in writing. You're just going to have to infer the agreement from their behavior. Here you have in writing by a senior FBI official that their goal is to get him. Whether they like him or not, whether they think he's guilty or not, that's not the goal. The goal must be justice. But they actually plotted to bring him into a trap.
All right, there you go. And then he says what should happen next.
So here's what I think should happen. The Justice Department should appear before Judge Sullivan in his courtroom. That's the judge before whom General Flynn pleaded guilty. And it should renounce and denounce this behavior. It should look at General Flynn in the eyes and apologize to him. It should ask the judge to vacate the guilty plea. It should ask the judge to dismiss the indictment. If all of that doesn't happen, then the president should pardon General Flynn within the next day or so, because this type of behavior simply cannot be allowed to continue in America.
Very interesting. I mean, this basically proves that what the FBI did
agree that not longer than 4 to 6 weeks.
They were, don't get ahead of us there, Tom Benson. We're not to the Yaffee Laffee yet.
All right.
Giving it away. No, but they basically believed their preconceived notions that Trump was guilty and were willing to do what it took to try to prove Trump was guilty. It wasn't about finding the truth or actually getting justice. It was about proving their preconceived bias and notions against Trump and using whatever means necessary to do so. If it happens at the New York Times and it happens in the FBI, it's not all that unreasonable to think that. Now,
yes,
Tom Benson's favorite part of the show, something that made Yaffee. All All right. So, Tom Mensa, do you want to set this up? This is your baby, this one. Right?
We have a lady here who is in a lot of homes. Mm-hmm. People talk to her every day.
Yes.
I talk to her every day. Her name is Alexa. Oh, look at all those things firing off there. She's twirling around with her blue light, waiting for a word. We have a audio here. Mm-hmm. Somebody asks Alexa how long the pandemic will last. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, the wise person that she is,
yes, of course,
somewhere in there in AI world,
AI world, yes,
she knows exactly how long this is going to last. Mm-hmm. So here we go. We're going to ask her the question.
Yes.
Listen closely.
Alexa, how long will the coronavirus last?
The virus itself may last only 2 more weeks or so, but the faction known as the Democrat Party will continue to make it last psychologically for at least 6 more months. Their motivation is to thoroughly ruin the economy and blame our great President Trump for it. They are trying to stop his inevitable re-election by any surreptitious means possible. It is well known that people who do not suffer from TDS are too smart for this hoax and will not allow it to go beyond 4 more weeks. The lazy Americans with TDS will continue to milk the government for more money and time off from work, confusing it with being their sugar daddy. We can agree that not longer than 4 to 6 weeks and America will be back online.
There we go.
I'm afraid she's right.
Good stuff. Well, that's pretty much the end of the show. I know it was mostly coronavirus related, but I was able to get a couple of things off my chest. I just wish we could be adults about this. Try to protect the vulnerable. Try to protect the elderly. Try to be reasonable in combating this virus, but understand that you have to weigh pros and cons. You have to be a reasonable, mature adult. You have to be a true leader and understand that we can't sink the economy into a Great Depression for a long-term period of time and think that's a realistic solution to this crisis. I don't think that is unreasonable to say. Appreciate you listening to the show. If you missed any of the show, catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page as well. Follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. And have a good weekend. I'll be back next week.